So hello everyone, thank you for being here. It's an honor to be invited by AI community to give a talk today. So as Alex already presented, I will talk about the role of communication dealing with catastrophic risk, and I will go a little bit further on existential risk, but I will introduce this topic a little bit later. To tell you a little bit about myself, for 6 years, I'm working for the International Risk Governance Center at EPFL, which is a center developing concepts, interdisciplinary unit developing concepts about risk governance, as well as giving recommendations for policy making in private and public sectors, more focused on emerging risk or new issues that are emerging or have not been considered. And we apply the risk governance concepts to a bunch of topics like, I don't know, I would say cryptocurrency space, deep fake, precision medicine, or a range of topics. But today I will focus on, as I said, emerging technologies, and more exactly on artificial intelligence as a case study. If you have any questions, especially for the people online, you can ask questions on slido.com using the connection number that you can see on the screen. And yeah, let's go in. So today I would like to focus, I will discuss on the present, various elements in present, but I would like to emphasize the fact that what we are doing, what we are communicating in present, it is influenced by the past, in the sense that we have knowledge, experience knowledge, or perceived knowledge, about the past. And what our decisions or our actions today, they are influencing the future by the fact that we are sharing a vision that we have about the future, but it also by creating narratives and stories around different technologies. This will influence the way that technologies are perceived in the future. I really wanted to give you that to have like a mindset when I continue the presentation. So I will start with an example, present you the concept of risk and risk governance, focusing on communication of risk, a case study on artificial intelligence, and finishing by proposing you a framework for responsible communication on emerging technologies. So I don't know if everybody is familiar with the RLC collapse. So RLC was at the point one of the first largest lakes in the world. In 1960, the Soviet Union decided to change the course of the rivers that were feeding the lake to irrigate the farmland in the area. Starting with then the lake started to disappear. We can see on the first picture A how it looked in 1977 and how it looked in 2013 on the last picture F. So definitely the fact that the irrigation, the plan for Soviet Union was to focus on agriculture and transformation of nature, had an impact on changing the course of the rivers and for irrigation. This was one of the causes and the main causes of what happened. After that, we also consider that we know that scientists, they're alarmed and they alarm about a possible risk that it could happen for the lake to disappear and have negative consequences, but the scale at it could happen, it was never foreseen. And also we discuss about socioeconomical changes, like the basin, before 1960, the fish industry was the main economic, let's say, income in the area. And in 1970, till 1990, when fisheries where commercial of fish was no longer existing. So we discuss about the fact that the sand, it was full of salt. It was a salty sand, full of also some toxic waste from some weapon testing on the delta, pesticides from agriculture, and everything have a very negative effect for the ecosystem as well as the people and health issues around the area. So there are a lot of lessons to be learned, but where I really want to focus is on the fact that it is an example of how one bad decision can affect the life of, to lead to million of destroy life. It can affect a lot of lives. This was first, and afterwards I will go what happened lately. In 2005, a dam was constructed between the north part of the sea and the south part, and the water in the basin started to rebound. And plus, there've been a lot of programs and a lot of initiatives to do the best they can to to do the best like the lake to become as before. It didn't happen, but still the north part is better. But I want to focus the fact that there is also an example of cooperation between different stakeholders in different areas. So I chose this example because it is a human-made catastrophe and also puts into perspective the importance of social, economical, especially political contexts that are to be considered. The consideration of irreversible damage that we have in what we said at the beginning, catastrophic risks, especially a lot more in existential risks, but I will get there. And the fact that the past examples, they are helping us to learn from mistakes. But I want to change a little bit the focus, saying that with new technologies and new development of the new technologies, maybe learning from mistakes would be better to be changed, to change the perspective, not to make the mistake from the first place, like to try to do the best, not to make the mistake in the first place. And after, if we even consider the existential risk, this is not even a choice, no. But I was looking at the risk assessment, some reports lately, like the Global Risk Report from World Economic Forum or the Global Assessment Report from the United Nations. I see there is a concentration of, they start to think of, to consider the importance of preparedness, the importance of using communication in order to deal with future risks. Just to know that to define risk or to share with you how I understand risk. In general, we talk about the hazard, the risk source, an event, an impact. There is an exposure depending on the link between the hazard and the target, vulnerability, how it could really happen, how vulnerable, the degree of vulnerability, depending on exposure, which gives rises to risk consequences. There are a lot of definitions. So a lot of fields are defining differently risk, but I will focus on the one that we are using at IRGC, because when IRGC is referring to risk, it's referring to consequences, but not only to negative consequences, but also the positive ones. And also puts an accent on the fact that they're depending on the value that the people associate with. So this puts also the importance of values and considering values of people when considering risks. There are different types of risk. I don't want to present you all of them. I just wanted to focus on 3 of them shortly, to say that there is a difference between, let's say, we have here conventional risk, which are the well-known risk. I don't know, you have car accidents, you have small car accidents. You can use the seatbelt in order to mitigate some of the risks. Emerging risks, they are the risks that coming from new technologies or old technologies that are used, they have new usage. And systemic risks, the one that are characterized by high interconnected risk and lack of knowledge, which was the example of the RLC. Depending on the type of risk and the knowledge that we have on risk, we have also different types of mitigation measures. We address those risks differently. And where I want also to get to this. I mentioned the catastrophic risk and the existential risk. So the catastrophic risk, they have the potential to have catastrophic consequences now. And the existential risk, they are going a little bit further. And I put some definitions there, but I will summarize that an existential risk jeopardizes the entire future of humankind. We can summarize it like that. And I like the Bostrom, how he positions the difference between existential risk and catastrophic risk, saying that existential risk, it is a subset of global catastrophic risk, but it goes a little bit, the scope is more cosmic and severity is more hellish. And there is something else that I want to discuss here, and is the fact that we don't have any objectivity, to deal or to judge a risk or an existential or catastrophic risk, because we did not experience it. So what Bostrom is saying is to use the best current subjective estimate that we can do, and this is what is considered how we can objectively look at the risks. And I also talk a lot about risk governance. Risk governance, it is more than risk analysis, where it looks also more largely at stakeholders. Which are the stakeholders? How to integrate the stakeholders, the context, the economic, the legal, political context. So it integrates more than just looking into the judging the probability and the impact of a certain risk. And also it has this normative and descriptive function. It says how the decision making it is made and how it should be made. IRGC at the center I told you that I'm working for, they developed a risk governance framework. And the framework I'm presenting at this today because I just want to present the idea of frameworks and why a framework would be useful in a certain condition. So this is the case for a risk governance framework that it is used, and it was designed for the decision makers to help the decision makers to guide their thinking, to guide their tasks, and not to forget to look into various elements and to detect the current of, and to be sure that you have a way to detect different deficits that probably you would have forgotten, or at least to make sure that you look at those. So it's a guidance that can be used with other types of models and of models. The framework looks like this, but I will present it to you shortly. The idea is that there is a part looking into understanding to generate knowledge that you have. And after on this the other side, the decision making and management. So in general, the traditional risk governance tools, they are focusing on risk assessment, the knowledge needed to assess the probability, potential severity of a risk and its perception. The management, the decision actions needed to prevent, mitigate, transfer, or adapt to a risk. And communication, what needs to be said about the risk. IRGC is coming and it brings new elements. And first, looking into the pre-assessment to frame the problem, to try to detect what is happening and to look into the context. And plus, it also looks at also looks at the concern, consider the concerns assessment that you have to look also which are the concerns of the people, stakeholders that are involved. As well as on this part on characterization and evaluation, IRGCs, the knowledge that we have about the risk takes a lot of importance. There is simple risk, or there are risks that are very uncertain or complex or ambiguous. And we treat and you should analyze and evaluate those kind of risks differently depending on what you know. But today, I presented all of this in order to present you the idea of a framework and how I see a framework, how it can help decision makers in their tasks. But I will focus today on the communication. Usually when we say communication and risk communication, we think about early and effective communication, about risk guidance to improve risk communication. In general, we have a certain type of guidelines. It depends who's producing them. Here I have the 7 cardinal rules of risk communication. I put only 5 because we do not have enough space. But the point was just to show that in general guidelines, they are focusing on be honest, listen to the public, plan, those kind of elements. Or others looking like the one published by WHO for this is the risk communication and community engagement, readiness and response to coronavirus disease. But it's a checklist saying you have to do that. You have to look at, I don't know, the challenges. You have to be sure that everybody's communicating the same thing. You have to be transparent. You have to be, so it's more like guidelines. The way that I look at communication goes a little bit more than that. It goes in the sense that when you communicate, the fact that the discourse and what you are saying has an effect, you have to consider responsibility. You have to think when you're doing it, you have to think that there is a short-term and long-term effect on that. And after I found, anyway, at a certain point, I just found a credo for ethical communication. This is National Communication Association. They publish a credo. And one of the 9 principles, it says we accept responsibility for the short and long-term consequences for our own communication and expect the same for others. This was the closest that I could find for in how I was seeing or how I look at communication, but still is not enough. This only shows the fact that there is a responsibility, you accept a responsibility, there is an effect of your communication, but still there is nothing, it doesn't say anything but about you as a responsible or what you take as a responsibility when you communicate. So I see communication, like I would say, as an organization. We communicate in the present. As I said, we are influenced by the past, and the way that we are communicating influences the future, because it shares the vision we have, but also what we say influences how, especially what we say about an emerging technology today as an organization, depending on the role, it has an impact on how the technology will be used. So I say communication, it has a lot of positive effect on how you can deal with this part of risk and risk associated with emerging technologies. And what is the sharing of information, development of common understanding, informed decisions, stakeholder engagement? We can use communication to align values, align goals. So I would say the responsibility comes from the consideration of these elements and also how you can influence those elements. So, and further, let's say taking a little bit more future perspective contributes to creating the future. Sounds a little bit more very promising, but I thought I will use artificial intelligence. For my research, I use artificial intelligence to look how governments and official representatives are communicating at European level. So I analyzed some reports published by European Commission, part of the AI strategy at European level, as well as national strategies regarding artificial intelligence. This was part of to look into how it is done. And afterwards, I also had research on the research of the literature to see how responsible communication could be defined. And I looked at various literature, communication, emerging technologies, organizational communication, corporate social responsibility. And I said that I will focus today, and everything I'm saying, it's more what I did during the research. So why artificial intelligence? We can say some of the risks associated with artificial intelligence can be existential risk, and where they can come from because they have been designed as doing something bad, or they have been designed to do something good, but as an accident it happened to do something bad. And as I said before, I consider there is a necessity to change the mindset in a way. So the research and technical solutions, they are welcome and they are very needed. But I think it's also, we can use other more perspectives. And one would be also, besides the technology and techniques that we can develop, to look also at other elements, like how we communicate about the technology. So I said we are in the present, we have different possible futures, and the purpose, it is what we do now to try to, anyway, to define the best future that we can see, to foresee that, and to try to get there. And for me, communication, it is a tool that we can, one among others, it's a small one, but we can use communication in doing that. So responsible communication, I told you a little bit about the research. And after all this research, I said that there are two elements to be considered. One is when we refer to responsible communication, one is to refer to the present as well as the future, and after it's also the technology. We have communication process, but also the communication regarding the technology. So this makes it to be what I consider and analyze as being a responsible communication is what looking at the communication process. Like I have to communicate transparently, for example, how we see before, but also in the present to communicate about the technology, what you already know about the technology, the positives, the negatives, the mitigation measures, as well as uncertainties that we have regarding technology. And after there is this future perspective, and the future perspectives look also at the future impact of your technology, I don't know, sustainability, but also to the, as I said, the future impact of the narrative. Bless you. The fact that you have a narrative, it has an effect on the future. So I developed these 4 perspectives, let's say 4 elements that for me, if you want to have a more responsible communication, you have to look into all of them and have to consider all of them. So this is, starting from there, I developed a framework for doing that and to try to guide, as we saw before, to try to guide a responsible communication. It's still a work in process. It's not been published. I just managed to put everything together. But in my framework, I say, okay, if we are considering organizational responsible communication, there are 5 pillars. Now, all the time you have to consider the transparency, the ethical behavior, sustainability, long-term future, all the time to consider the long-term future, and the idea of good governance. Now, to everything that you're doing to be transparent and have. And I suggest 5 or 6 steps. The first, it is to gather information about the context. First, to decide why you're using that, what's your purpose, what do you want to do, what it is about. And afterwards, to define the scope of the technology, its impact. If you are referring to an emerging technology, what's this technology? What's the impact? What's the positives, negatives? Gather all the information you have from the experts, a different type of experts. And also to identify the stakeholder, which is very important to know who are the people which are affected directly, who are the people who are not affected directly, to determine their needs and their concerns, their sources of information, to try to use them afterwards, to try to have a very focused communication, and establish a develop the communication strategy, besides defining clear communication goal to align with the values, to align with your perspective and missions and objectives, to implement the communication plan and establish all the time a monitoring of your own communication process and evaluation, to be sure that you put in place evaluation and monitoring mechanisms. And all of this, passing from one side from one step to another, I think it's very important to continuous improvement, to continuous feedback and adaptation. If there is something that's changed, acknowledge the change, a stakeholder, they change something, I don't know, media, there's a new information in media, you have to adapt that. Now you have all the time to adapt. And also very important is the systemic communication, not to forget to communicate all the time and not to leave the space for other sources to fill in a gap that you don't have. So that's the framework that I'm proposing in order to guide how we could be more responsible when we are communicating. So in conclusion, I'd say that first of all, I argue there is a need for a different mindset, how we look at things. And I really believe that communication can help in addressing future risk. It can be a risk governance tool because it helps in sharing information, aligning values, engage with stakeholders, talk about the risk, talk about what you know, what you don't know. It's the way that you can, and after we hear all the time, create trust. But that's one of the sources. And I believe that the framework that I presented, it helps doing that. It helps integrate, not forget about the stakeholders, to implement, to influence participation. And all of this, in my opinion, has an impact on improving risk assessment as well as improving risk preparedness. Like, it helps to be more resilient in the way we prepare the community, we prepare the people. Being more responsible, we really prepare them. And if something happens, they already know, they have that knowledge behind. So it's more like going again for a very long word to reach sustainability in a way. So there's a long of references, and now we get to the end. So yeah, thank you very much. And if you have any questions now, if not, you can write me an email. And yeah, you can use slido.com for questions. Thank you very much.